Hi, I'm Perry Fry with the HDA Research Foundation. Welcome to our conversation about distribution industry trends to watch. This is based on the 96th edition of the HDA Factbook, which highlights the growth and trends in the pharmaceutical distribution industry. This is based on surveys that are collected from our members over $1 billion and talks about their traditional distribution business. I'd like to welcome Scott Hackworth, who is the president of Industry Insights. Industry Insights has been conducting the Factbook research for the HDA Research Foundation for 25 years.
That's correct.
Outstanding. We turn all the data over to him. He's able to aggregate all that and bring back to us a Factbook. Scott, introduce yourself.
Thank you. And it's great to be with you. Always good to be back with you, Perry. And I look forward to our chat here just to discuss. As you mentioned, 25 years. Industry Insights has been leading the research. So all the data do come to us. We get to see that. We get to interact with the companies about their data, about what's going on. So it's been a really great journey just being part of the industry.
Well, and I know you do this for a lot of other industries, so we're going to dig into that a little bit later. But let's talk about our Factbook and what's going on in the distribution industry. The Factbook continues to highlight continued efficiency in healthcare distributors, but we have a really impressive evolving business environment. What are some of the key findings and trends that stood out from this year's report?
Well, you're certainly right. I mean, your industry is very unique, and it is unlike the others. We, at Industry Insights, we do see about 25 industries that we work with, distributor industries each year. And so there's certainly a lot of unique components. Really, when we look at the data, most recently, 3 trends have been really popping out to us. One, and all of the trends relate to efficiency and just maximizing the resources within the industry. And that's really, that's the major component that your members are doing so well. And the 3 trends that we're seeing is growing trend toward automation. That continues to be a big push. Your members right now are at about 68% of your distribution centers are implementing automation, and so into the processes. And we're seeing that. We're seeing continual growth in terms of the employee productivity. And so they're not reducing headcount, your members. They're actually just changing the dynamics of the employees and maximizing their productivity through the automation and really enhancing what they're doing. And so we see a lot of that. That has been huge. There's also a big shift right now in the specialty product and how that's been impacting the industry in quite a lot of ways. In fact, most recently, on a dollar volume, it's 39% of the overall bundle that's going out. And so we have 39%. That compares to 16% a decade ago. So that is sizable, especially when you think about specialty products, right? These specialty products, a lot of them require cold chain handling. You know, they have to be closely monitored. There's some patient interaction there sometimes. And so the model is changing, and that is really having an impact on what's going on in the industry as well.
I think the other thing you see in specialty is it's not just the complexity of the product, but it adds a much different customer mix, right? So they're expanding beyond traditional pharmacy into doctor's offices, hospitals, and so there's so many more points of service that our distributors have to take on.
For sure. And all of that's a sizable shift that's been happening in a pretty short time period.
So you talked about efficiency.
Yes.
How do you define that? Like when we're sitting there just looking at the numbers, on a spreadsheet, what pops out about efficiency?
Well, your numbers, and you and I talk, a lot throughout the year, and we really get deep in the numbers. But your industry is just so good at maximizing. Again, so we look at, for instance, your inventory turns. So the industry is unique, as we talk about, and as everyone knows, that you're supplying a very necessary product, right? To people in need who, if they don't have it, are in real dire positions. So we do that. So we have to have the inventory on hand. But at the same time, they're able to do that where they're only holding it for 22 days at a time. Now, because of the scale of the industry, that still equates to $50 billion of inventory is being held there. But it's really only 22 days at a time because they flip it 17 times a year. And so they are extremely efficient at doing that. They're also extremely efficient at managing their receivables. Because in this industry, the cash and the cash conversion that they do, so that's another efficient piece. And being able to move that cash and how they have to receive it quickly. So they hold it for a short period, they receive it quickly, and then they have to manage their payables on the other end. And so all of that kind of works together. And so that's what we look at in terms of our efficiency within the industry, and that's what kind of makes it unique.
Another thing that's unique about this industry are some remarkably low profit margins. What are driving those numbers?
Well, lots of things are unique, certainly about your industry, but the most unique is that your cost of goods sold, actually, so the actual cost of the product exceeds what the actual revenue. So it's 100.6%. So the direct cost of the product is actually more than they're receiving in revenue. All of the money to work with comes from vendor payment terms. And so those are kind of negotiated pricing and from actually the vendor payment negotiations that happens. So normally, our distributors are able to, they see a price, they mark it up, they're able to do that. They don't have that because they're basically a price taker in this industry. So they have to work within that. There's a lot of things that are impacting right now the margins. And so we are on a little bit of a slide with the margins. I mean, and when I say a little bit, it's been 11 years where the margins have been shrinking. Now, some of that's a little bit of a misnomer because that's been somewhat of a product of the changing product cycle. Like we just talked about, these specialty products have been growing and there's not the commensurate margin on them. So we do see lesser margin on some of the specialty products. Also the labor costs. That's really the one that has been hitting here in the last few years. And so your labor costs are now, as a percentage of gross margin, they're up considerably. And that just also is because, one, labor tightening has been a big piece. And so across the board, in all industries, labor has become a bigger component.
Is that sort of a impact from COVID and how we've come out of that labor market tightening?
We do believe it is. And one of the things that in healthcare distribution during COVID, you saw a way less employee turnover than other industries did. So when we had the Great Resignation was taking place, your industry was actually somewhat protected from that because they were these essential employees. They were doing this great work. They were in the media and, the healthcare and all of that was great. And so you really stayed protected. Some of that has started to slow down. I mean, you've more normalized than what we were during that period.
In your observation of other industries, so you actually had a really good point about the cost of goods sold versus sales, and that's sort of my favorite party trick. When someone says, "Oh, really? How complicated is your industry?" Well, our cost of goods sold exceed our sales, which immediately produces a lot of question marks floating over people's heads. Tell me how this looks in other industries. I know food service is big. There's probably a few others that have similar models where there's a few really large players. Those players have very large, national customers. There's some similarities there, but our numbers look a lot different than some of those other industries.
They do. And so the general distributor, just for reference, normally has a gross margin of somewhere 10 to 15% is somewhat typical. And then it goes lower. Like for instance, I believe in food, it's somewhere in that 2 to 5 range. And yours is below 2 and for the industry. So that is a considerable difference in terms of that. The complexity of the industry is also a real difference in terms of the amount of regulation that happens. The amount of, for instance, I use the example of if a typical distributor, if they misship a laptop to a customer, there's inconvenience, right? A little frustration. There's some of that. In your industry, if there's, something that goes wrong in the supply chain, not only possibly do you have a federal investigation about it, but you also have a patient who's in need of that product. You have a patient who has some severe, potentially some severe problems there as well. So there is a lot riding on the success of your industry.
Yeah, the regulation piece is kind of unique, and you talk about the efficiency and the technology investment that we've had in our industry. A lot of that's been driven by DSCSA, right? So we have this rule where we're required to trace the path of all these products. We have some other things coming into the industry where we're going to have to change the NDC number, and there's probably going to be a lot of investment that goes on there as well. How do they take on that investment when they're in an environment that has so much financial risk?
Well, so yes, your members are continuing to spend. They're continuing to make investments, and those investments are paying off, frankly. I mean, in the productivity and in the efficiency. And we have seen the risk positions had really risen. And so starting in like 2017, we're climbing considerably. Last year, we saw that the cash positions improved for your members. Despite some of their investments, they were able to kind of squeeze from the inventory, from the receivables, and they saw better debt positions than they've been in. Because that is one of the things that we've been watching in the industry, is that amount of debt or the amount of assets that are being financed through debt. Most recently, they invested $120 million in just the technology for the capital expenditures. So the industry continues, and like you're saying, I mean, all these changes, all the regulations, the requirements are, so they're spending $400 million overall in capital expenditures, and a third of that was in just technology expense.
Yeah, I think it's super important. When you talk to our members, all of them are constantly developing new projects to try to get to that point of efficiency, because it is a complex market with all the different types of customers that they have to have now. It's also interesting, I think, as some of the larger companies have grown, we've had some recent consolidation in the industry. Everyone's having to invest in systems that support those, fully integrated companies, and I think that'll be something they continue to probably focus on.
I agree.
What I don't know that I prepped you for this one, but we're sending out the surveys are out now for the next Factbook. We're getting closer and closer to our 100th. What do you expect to see coming out of the next set of data that we get for the Factbook?
Well, I'll tell you, all signs are pointing to continued very strong growth. And so your members, I mean, that is really one of the stories, is the growth and just the size and how it continues to grow. So we're expecting double digit again, which I believe will be the fourth straight year that we've had double digit growth in the industry. So that is exceptional, especially given that inflation has, pretty much been down. There for a while, we were saying, inflation maybe bringing up some of the numbers. But right now, we're seeing very, very strong growth, a lot of that on the top line. We are also hoping that some of the margin pressure, hopefully, will start to at least edge out or at least level out. And so we are hoping that just with these efficiencies and with the productivity within the industry, that we're hoping to see some of that as well.
Yeah, and we'll eventually see the impact, if there is any, of a lot of activity going on here in Washington, and on the Hill, there's a lot of focus on this industry, and we'll see at some point how that impacts the business of our members. Scott, I want to thank you. I appreciate you spending time with us today. We'll hopefully be back able to do this again next year and talk about a really solid marketplace for our distributor members. I want to let everyone know that the Factbook is actually a free resource and it's easily downloadable on our website. So take a look at that anytime. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to HDA. But Scott, thank you, and we'll talk to you next year.
Thank you. Great to be with you.